when I started my business, I tried to do everything on my own for the first couple of years, because otherwise the expenses can really, ramp up. But, when's the ideal time to kind of get advice or get support with the finances?
I would say the earlier the better, right? So to put it back into medical terms, right? I think it's important to go see sort of that general doctor in the finance sense, for those checkups, because as we all know, the earlier you catch something, the easier it is to cure, right? So if we can go and get a checkup and we can be diagnosed during stage one, it's a heck of a lot easier to fix something than if the saddest thing, or the worst thing to see is someone that comes to you when it's too late, right? So sometimes you don't know you have a problem until it's too late to fix that problem. So
Mm-hmm.
getting ahead of it and almost having that preventive care, I think can never hurt. And you kind of touched on like that additional cost, right? And I look at it sometimes in the sense of dieting. So healthier food might be a little bit more expensive, but in the long term, your health is a heck of a lot more important, and it's in the long run it's cheaper, right, to invest that $10 a week at the grocery store, to avoid those long-term health issues. And I think
Yeah.
another thing too is when you jump into a territory of water you haven't swum in before, it's so hard to know about everything, right? You don't know what you don't know. So bringing in that expert to kind of take that off your plate and catch those issues early, I think is vitally important.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was going to say next, is that we all, or most of us have an emotional attachment to our finances, and it can be a very personal thing. And then when you go into business, there has to be more transparency there. You're reporting more things, you're having to pay attention to more subtle, differences, and having to talk to someone about your finances can be quite overwhelming or like stressful. But I think touching on what you said, like often in our heads it's so much worse than it actually is, because we're not looking at it. Like
Mm.
we're so used to avoiding it and pushing it to the back and thinking like one day I'm going to get to that. But in doing so, the stress and the apprehension is just building and building. And actually, if you look at it, it's probably not going to be as bad as you think. But you need someone who actually has the expertise to say, actually, this isn't so bad, or actually, we need to do something about this before it becomes much worse later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like going to the doctor. We'll use that one again, right? I hate going to the doctor. Sometimes you got to get shots. It's uncomfortable. It's time out of your day. But at the end of the day, sometimes you leave the doctor and you're like, oh, you're healthy, right? And you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Or it's, hey, we caught something early. Thank God I went to that doctor. And you can sleep better at night knowing, I went on WebMD after I coughed last night, and am I dying? That's a side effect, but having that expert kind of give me that answer, it gives me that greater confidence and clarity to be able to sleep at night knowing I'm okay, right? So there's
Hmm.
also a price tag on peace of mind as well that
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
is so important.
Yeah. So why don't we look at kind of some of the avenues that someone might go down with their finances? Like, you have the personal side, you have the business side, and for a lot of people, those are very well intertwined. Especially when you're first starting in business, you might have a solopreneurship approach where everything's kind of mingled, and then later on, you might have an LLC or a corporation or what have you, and it gets more and more complex as you go. But what are some of like the common buckets that people should be looking at? Like for example, well, I don't even know. You tell me.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say congratulations on making that jump, right? Going into entrepreneurship is scary. Myself as an entrepreneur, it's scary. There's not a paycheck coming in every week. Making that jump is awesome, and you deserve a congratulations for that. So that's first and foremost. And then, as we get into all these different buckets, right? So there's so much you can do, right? There's thousands of things you can do, but what's important is knowing what you should be doing. So out of those thousands of things that you can do, what are the five most important things for your business that you should be doing? And I think a lot of the times when we're managing our own financials or anything along those lines, we kind of get overwhelmed and we're taking general advice besides specific advice. So you're doing a bunch of things where, hey, it might not be a bad thing to do, but should you really be spending your time on this? Or should you be spending your time on growing your business and, or, whatever it is. So I think there's so many things that you can get, confused by and looking around and all those different things, when if you really just kind of had that coach or can put your head down and say, I'm going to knock out these 5 things. This is what I need to do for my business to be successful. Because, no one wants to spend time on this. You guys made the jump to spend as little time on that stuff and as most time on your business, right? So that's what we aim to do.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned like 5 things. Do you have like some specific kind of assessment areas that you would go to first of all?
Yeah, I think a big thing when you make that jump is tax planning, right? So taxes get really complex sometimes. And a lot of people look at taxes as a 2 month out of the year thing, right? So we're gonna, drop off my paperwork in March and hopefully everything gets taken care of and that's it, right? Whereas, what we aim to do is, bring in strategic CPAs that are going to look at taxes throughout the year. There's going to be comprehensive tax planning going on. So at the end of the day, the most, everything is being done in a strategic way. So your money's, most effectively either going back in your business or going to you, and everything's being flooded into growth of the business. So I think taxes are a big thing, that oftentimes people don't really think about when they're starting their own business. There's a lot of perks to being a business owner, and on the tax side that sometimes aren't fully taken advantage of. Um, and then another huge thing, that we see a lot is protecting it, right? So you went out, you took this jump. Let's protect that business. Let's make sure that we're protecting it from divorce, we're protecting it from lawsuits, we're protecting it from creditors, all those different things, so that the business that you worked hard to grow, the business that you worked hard to start, is going where it intended. God forbid something happened to you, or something went wrong. Let's plan for the worst and make sure that everything is in place to protect that business.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And going back to the taxes, I think you make a really valid point that we don't necessarily take full advantage of the benefits that we have at our fingertips because we're not used to it, or like we've just not had the education on it, or done it before. But I think on the flip side as well, a lot of people are afraid that they are expensing too many things or like going too far the other way, and that they're going to be flagged and audited and all of that. So it's trying to find that middle ground where you're doing it in a legitimate legal way and getting those benefits, but you're not like creating red flags for your business so that you're going to be hunted down by the tax people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes back to maybe trying to wear too many hats, right? So you're the business owner, you're coming from a medical background. The tax laws are constantly changing. The tax laws are extremely complex. There's CPAs where that's all they do. Myself, that I'm not an expert in that. I don't claim to be, and I don't want to be. But there's some people that's all they do. Of course, if you're trying to do that on your own, it's overwhelming. And the majority of the time there is going to be some sort of lack, either too much or too little. So I think that's a prime example of handing that off to a professional and letting a professional manage that. At the end of the day, one is going to clear your calendar, because I can only imagine the amount of time you're going to spend researching tax laws, trying to file doing all that yourself is a nightmare and it's complex, takes a ton of time, right? And then that other side is that stress point that we talked about earlier, keeping you up at night worrying about what you're doing with your taxes. Where if we can eliminate both those things and have an expert come in, it's going to allow you to spend so much more time focusing on your business, and it's going to spend all your thought and energy is going to go towards growing that business, which at the end of the day is what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you touched on this earlier, but I think it's a very empowering thing to be able to look at your finances and in your business and just know what is happening. Like, are we growing? Are we not? Are we plateauing? Like, am I actually making enough for this to be sustainable? And if not, how can I do something about that? Like, it gives us a lot of power to have that information, because even if something isn't great, we can see what has worked in the past, what has the potential of working, and kind of work with that to shift things in the favor of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't know what you don't know, and if someone can come in and diagnose something, it's easier to address, right? So if we know where we're falling short, if we know, hey, this is really working, why don't we do more of that? So having that, extra set of eyes, or someone that's kind of over your shoulder, not over your shoulder, but just reviewing things and can diagnose that, can lead to just tremendous amount of growth.
Yeah, and a lot of times what happens with freelance writers is that if they don't take the time to assess, like, where's the money coming, what clients am I working with, what projects am I taking on, like, to kind of break it down and have that analysis, they can end up just staying stuck in the same place for years and not necessarily enjoying what they're doing, even though they have complete freedom over their workload and their schedule. So we'll often see that, someone will have like one client that is monopolizing like 60-70% of their time, but not really compensating them very well. And then they only have that, 30% to go and work with clients who are actually paying them well, treating them well, giving them flexibility, letting them enjoy the quality of life that they've created for themselves. But when they look at it, in an objective way, immediately it's like, oh, I can make a change here. I can either drop that client, open up my availability, I can up my pricing, and if they walk away, I can find someone else. Like it puts you in the driver's seat then to make some decisions about your business.
Absolutely. And sometimes it deep down inside, right? You should be making a change, but you almost just need to hear it from someone else. And that's another thing that, that can be huge, right? So
Hmm.
you just need that, you need that second opinion, you need that other voice telling you you're right. You're right, but you just need to hear it.